Lately, forgiveness has been pinging into my spiritual inbox on the hour in that way that Anne Lamott, in her essay called Forgiveness, refers to as God as Sam I Am. Now, you remember Sam I Am from Green Eggs and Ham, refusing to stop popping up and doing crazy rhymes until someone agrees to eat his weird emerald breakfast. It feels to me that sometimes the Holy Spirit takes it on herself to foreground something we need to learn or do or be, to hammer us with the equivalent of billboards and skywriting until we get it, or start to. So, lately, besides proofreading my new novel and finding it laced with forgiveness, I revised my next novel and found the same. The great Houston pastor and preacher Ralph Douglas West and I recently taught my novel, The Prodigal, which some of you have read, in a Jan term class for Baylor's Truett Seminary. Pastor Sean asked me to preach this morning about a film that I love, and I chose the 1999 Paul Thomas Anderson film Magnolia without even stopping to think about the fact that one of its most notable lines comes from Officer Jim Curring, played by John C. Reilly. What can we forgive? And to top it all off, if the spirit is finished for the moment, which may or may not be true, my latest article for Baptist News Global, where I'm a senior columnist, and so I get to write about whatever I want, is an interview with Matthew Ishihashi Potts, the Plummer Professor of Christian Morals at Harvard Divinity School, and the author of an amazing new book called Forgiveness. In my conversation with Matt, I found this immediately jumping out at me, and I wanted to share it with you to frame our time together. Matt told me, one way I think about forgiveness is that it's the judgment love renders. I think we tend to think of forgiveness as undoing wrong, as erasing it somehow. But in fact, to say, I forgive you, is to imply that there is something that needs forgiving. To say, I forgive you, is also to say, you have wronged me. But in rendering that judgment, forgiveness tries to figure out what loving the wrongdoer would look like. I will confess to you that I need a refresher class in forgiveness just now because there is somebody I'm trying very hard to forgive. This person's wrongdoing mostly affects me only indirectly, but that wrongdoing hurts and is hurting people I love. And in some ways, I find that even harder to grapple with. I note that when I think about this person's behavior, I'm angrier than if I were the victim of it, and I am reminded of Annie Lamott's wisdom in her essay that not forgiving somebody is like taking cyanide and waiting for your enemy to die. It's a spiritual cancer that eats away at us if we let it, and I do not want to let it. I know what failing to forgive has done to me in the past, have seen what it can do to others, including the characters in Magnolia, riddled, as many of them are, by pain and self-loathing. And so, where I hope we will arrive at the end of our time together is at the ending that Matt describes. Forgiveness tries to figure out what loving the wrongdoer would look like. My son Chandler and I talked about Magnolia last weekend. We both place it in our all-time top 5, that rarefied air that the latest Spike Lee or Quentin Tarantino film might float into or out of, but where Magnolia has been securely tethered to the mountainside for decades. There has never been a time since 1999, when the movie was released, when it has not been one of my favorite films. And when I asked Pastor Sean if I had carte blanche to pick any film, because you may know that Sean and I often do public programs where we screen and discuss movies on race and justice, and we'll do that again this fall at Ecclesia, he told me to knock myself out. And I did. That is not to say that Magnolia is not a troubling and difficult movie. It is 3 hours long. It features a mammoth cast of characters, almost all of whom have been badly damaged by the past, by others, and by themselves. A former TV quiz kid, William H. Macy, exploited by his parents. A current contestant, Jeremy Blackman, used as a meal ticket by his father. The TV game show host, Philip Baker Hall, who years ago sexually abused his daughter, Melora Walters. The producer of that TV show, Jason Robards, who also, long ago, left his teenage son, Tom Cruise, to care for his wife. The boy's mother, as she died painfully of cancer. The producer's new wife, Julianne Phillips, who has been unfaithful to him, and now finds she can't live with the guilt of what she's done. And so it goes, and so it goes. As the movie says, we may be through with the past, but the past is not through with us. Magnolia is a beautiful, hard, true film. And as I often say when I teach or talk about it, at the end of the second act, stories have 3 acts, it feels as if you're at the very bottom of the ocean and you will never know light or warmth again. And then God moves and grace flows, but I get ahead of myself. Rather than try to tell you about every one of these characters, sketch out all the storylines for you, let's let the movie's trailer do its work. Please watch this preview of Magnolia.
Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a line to you from an opera. I want you to give me that line back in the language in which the opera was originally written. And for a bonus $250, you can sing it.
I'm Stanley Spector.
There is the story of a boy genius.
Willa Cather, Thomas Kidd, Jean-Baptiste Clairmoyer,
and the game show host.
I'm Jimmy Gator.
Live from Burbank, California.
First question for 25. This French playwright and actor joined the Béjart troupe of actors.
And the ex-boy genius.
I'm Quiska Donnie Smith. I used to be smart, now I'm just stupid.
There is the story of the dying man.
I'm Earl Partridge.
I have a son, you know.
You do?
Find him.
I'm Frank T.J. Mackey.
His lost son.
What did he say? Because I am not going to take care of him. What does he want?
And the dying man's wife.
I'm Linda Partridge. I took care of him through this, Alan. What now, then? Me and him. Did you understand? There's no one else. No one else.
The caretaker.
No.
I'm Phil Parma.
See, this is the scene of the movie where you helped me out.
And there is the story of a mother.
I'm Rose Gator.
You come home soon after the show. I love you.
Love you too.
And the daughter.
I'm Claudia Wilson Gator.
Now that I've met you, would you object to never seeing me again?
And the police officer in love.
I'm Officer Jim Curring.
My life is very stressful, and I'd hope to have a relationship that is very calm and undemanding and loving. So if you are this person, please leave me a message at box number 82.
And this will all make sense in the end.
I know life is getting shorter. I can't bring myself to set the scene, even when it's approaching torture. I've got my routine.
This is not an easy job. I have to take everything and play it as it lays. Sometimes people need a little help. Sometimes people need to be forgiven. And that is a very tricky thing on my part, making that call. But you can forgive someone, well, that's the tough part. What can we forgive?
Was that unclear?
Kind of.
Oh, God.
There's so much in this brief introduction that it's almost impossible to pick where to start. But I hope this gives you a feel for the majesty of Anderson's direction, the powerful presence of Amy Mann's songs, and the artistry of Anderson's script. I often say that for a film like this, or Love Actually, or Nashville, or any other movie with a multitude of lead characters, viewers have to learn to suspend some of their usual disbelief about coincidence. For his part, Anderson does his best to build meaningful links between the characters and to try and offer some foreshadowing. References to a particular verse in the book of Exodus point toward the moment at the end of the movie where God intervenes, and which I will not spoil. In my book, The Gospel According to Hollywood, I describe it as a full-fledged Old Testament-style miracle. And so crazy as that moment seems, Anderson is well aware that he has to prepare for it, with talk about meaningful coincidences, the idea that all sorts of things can and do happen in this world, and the underlying notion that there is a benevolent, controlling intelligence behind this world that Paul Thomas Anderson has created. Now, that moment of miraculous intervention doesn't make any of the moments leading up to it any easier. A student at Baylor once came up to me at the end of this film almost in tears. And while tears are an appropriate response to this hard, heavy, but ultimately grace-filled story, her distress came from a different direction. She was upset about having sat through the movie we had just watched. Said she had spent her entire life trying to avoid being in the company of people, like the foul-mouthed, immoral, badly broken characters in Magnolia. I listened, because I could see that she was wrestling with the reality of this movie, and maybe that reality itself is R-rated. And then, as gently as I could, I remember saying this: I guess Jesus didn't get that memo. Because of course you know, and I know, that Jesus went to those who were unloved and unlovely, those who were badly broken like these characters in Magnolia. That we were offered this grace, that while we were yet sinners, Jesus gave his life to redeem us. That we, who have been given that grace, are called to the work Officer Curring calls the tough part. Sometimes people need a little help. Sometimes people need to be forgiven. And this 3-hour movie, operatic, is how Roger Ebert of blessed memory described it. Full of despair and disease and even death, remains one of the most powerful stories I know about how we might do those things, about how we might live with grace and purpose. There are so many important characters in this film, so many interconnected storylines, that we can only give attention to a few. At the center of the film and its web of relationships is TV producer Earl Partridge. As I mentioned, years ago, Earl abandoned his wife Lily, who was dying of cancer, as well as his son, who now goes by the name of Frank T.J. Mackey and leads horrifying seminars on how to seduce and abandon women, just like his father did. Earl knows that he did wrong. And as we'll see in this upcoming scene, he's actually achieved a state we think of as being a healthy part of being forgiven: remorse. In this clip, Earl, in his final hours, tells his nurse Phil, played by the late lamented Philip Seymour Hoffman, about when he met and fell in love with Lily.
She was like a doll. Yeah. A beautiful porcelain doll. And the hips, the childbearing hips, you know that? Yeah, so beautiful. And I cheated on her over and over and over again, because I wanted to be a man, and I didn't want her to be a woman, you know, a smart, free person who was something. So stupid. What would I think? Did I think for what I'd done? She was my wife for 23 years, and I went behind her over and over. I'd come home and get in her bed and say, I love you. This is Jack's mother. His mother, Lily. These two that I had. And I lost. This is the regret that you make. This is breath that you make, and the something you take, and the blah, blah, blah. Something, something. Give me a cigarette. Okay. Yeah. Oh. Oh. Mistakes like this, you don't make. Sometimes you make some, and okay. Not okay sometimes. You make other ones. Yeah. Know that you should do better. I loved Lily. I cheated on her. She was my wife for 23 years. And I have a son. And she has cancer. And I'm not there. And he's forced to take care of her. He's 14 years old. To take care of his mother and watch her die on him. With a little kid. And I'm not there. And she does die.
Earl has asked Phil to find his son. Frank is so furious with his father that he still doesn't ever want to see him again. But he arrives at his father's house just after Phil has given Earl the morphine for his last journey. Frank sits and rages at his unconscious father. I hope you're in a lot of pain, he tells Earl. She was in a lot of pain. Anderson holds the camera on Tom Cruise's face as it moves from rage to loss to grief. Earl has broken him, shattered his life, helped to shape him into the loathsome, selfish man he has become, but at the end of things, Frank realizes that he still loves his father. Don't go away, he weeps. Still cursing at him, yes, but don't go away. Earlier in the film, we've heard that when Earl receives that morphine, it is the end of him. Whoever he was, whatever he was, will be gone. But then that miracle I told you about, the miracle that shakes and saves the lives of every character in Magnolia willing to tell the truth, breaks into that sick room. Earl opens his eyes, turns his head, and for a moment, at the absolute end of his life, he meets the tear-filled eyes of his son, and something happens. Frank looks at his father with forgiveness as he gasps his last breaths. And Earl dies knowing that he is forgiven. At the end of the film, Frank will leave his father's house and go to the hospital to sit now beside his stepmother, who in her guilt and grief has tried to take her own life. It is an unexpected moment of grace, another unexpected moment of forgiveness we would not have expected from Frank T.J. Mackey. It is the hard thing Officer Curring spoke about, the hard thing that Jesus teaches in the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew. Read with me. You have been taught to love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you this, love your enemies. Pray for those who torment you and persecute you. In so doing, you become children of your Father in heaven. He, after all, loves each of us, good and evil, kind and cruel. He causes the sun to rise and shine on evil and good alike. He causes the rain to water the fields of the righteous and the fields of the sinner. It is easy to love those who love you. Even a tax collector can love those who love him. And it is easy to greet your friends. Even outsiders do that. But you are called to something higher. Be perfect, as your Father in heaven is perfect. Earl has told Phil we should do better. Some mistakes you don't make. And yet we make mistakes all the time. Others make mistakes that damage or even bury us, and yet we are called to imagine that better, higher way, that faithful attempt to figure out what loving the wrongdoer would look like. Now, please note that nowhere in this passage from the Sermon on the Mount does Jesus ever suggest that all actions are relative, that there is no such thing as good or evil, that your torment and persecution at another's hands are not real. He knows that they are. Some mistakes you don't make. No. The pain those mistakes can cause, the hurt they engender, are very real. Matt Potts argues that the Christian idea of forgiveness does not forgo the sort of anger and grief we see Frank expressing at his father's deathbed, or that I sometimes feel when I think about that person whose wrongdoing harms the people I love. We are not called to pretend that there has been no hurt. Real forgiveness can only happen in response to real wrongdoing. Perhaps what the philosopher Jacques Derrida says is even true. There is only forgiveness, if there is such a thing, of the unforgivable. It would be easy to dwell on our injury, to stew in the resentment. We're shown what that looks like in Magnolia. But we are called to do more, to do better, to, in Jesus' words, strive for perfection like that of our Father in heaven, and to forgive as our Father forgives us. At the end of Magnolia, Officer Jim Curring pulls together many of the threads in the movie. In the aftermath of that miracle I keep teasing, he is still smarting from a first date with Claudia, the daughter of the TV host, who has fled in fear from his request that they be honest with each other. But the miracle brings him face to face with the former quiz kid who has stolen from his employer, then changed his mind. Officer Curring helps him take the money back into the store, replace it in the safe. And all along, we hear him talking about the necessity of doing the right thing and of forgiveness. A lot of people think that this is just a job that you go to. Take a lunch hour, job's over, something like that. But it's a 24-hour deal. No two ways about it. And what most people don't see is just how hard it is to do the right thing. Sometimes people need a little help. Sometimes people need to be forgiven. If you can forgive someone, well, that's the tough part. What can we forgive? Tough part of the job. Tough part of walking down the street. Jim Curring, our Jesus figure in Magnolia, knows it. Jesus, our Redeemer King, teaches it. If we're only able to love the lovely, what are we? But to love the unlovely, to forgive what seems unforgivable, well, ultimately that is the Christian lesson this movie teaches us how to do and do better. At the end of the movie, Jim Curring goes to Claudia and encourages her not to be afraid. He tells her that whatever is in her past, she is a good and beautiful person, worthy of love and forgiveness. In Magnolia, we see as God sees, with a sympathy for the brokenness which enters into every human life. In Magnolia, we see that God makes the showers to fall upon the just and the unjust. And in Magnolia, we discover how God is right there with us as we try to live into the tough part of the job. Sometimes God even throws in some variety of miracle to help make it possible. Ecclesia, please pray with me. Holy One of Grace, we give thanks that you do not give up on us, that whatever mistakes we make, you have loved and will always love us. Help us to love as you love, to forgive as you forgive, and to carry you into a broken world that badly needs healing and wholeness. We ask all this in the name of your Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.